Hi, and welcome to another edition of USAJobZoo.com TV. I'm AJ Janitschek along with CEO Bill Golden, CEO of USAJobZoo.com TV and USAJobZoo.com Radio. Bill.
Indeed, and you know what CEO means? It means if you need coffee, you need to go get it.
Do you make your own coffee?
I do make my own coffee.
Oh, how sad. Well, the good news is that today's program is sponsored by IntelligenceCareers.com. Whether you have a clearance or whether you don't, you can go to IntelligenceCareers.com and look for a job in most any state in the nation.
And 28 countries.
Maybe 29 by the time you get there.
In good and very bad neighborhoods everywhere.
And today's featured employer is Lockheed Martin. Again, like Intelligence Careers, they are coast to coast, and if you go to IntelligenceCareers.com or USAJobZoo.com, you'll find a link to Lockheed Martin. Click on the link like you see on your screen, and you'll be able to find a job through Lockheed Martin, or find one through IntelligenceCareers.com, or find one through USAJobZoo.
And Lockheed Martin has a major campaign on throughout November.
What's that?
They are looking for folks in the geospatial industry, but they're looking for all kinds of people in geospatial, not just geospatial scientists and analysts, but folks who do web, imagery, photography, all of the support kinds of jobs, technical program management. Lockheed Martin has a major hiring requirements list out there, and they're interviewing people on Mondays and Tuesdays. So click
throughout the entire month of November?
Throughout the entire month. So click on the Lockheed Martin banner. It will give you instructions as to specifically who they're looking for, how to apply, and potentially how to get an interview.
And I guess it's good to know that you don't necessarily have to have a clearance to work with Lockheed Martin, although I suspect that's a primary focus of their
Most of these
search.
Jobs will require a security clearance, but as always, go look, go ask questions, it never hurts.
Lockheed Martin and IntelligenceCareers.com. There are our featured people today.
They are. Now, when we last left off, we were talking about creating your own job.
Creating your own job. There was a nice article that we had 5 points on how to help create your own job. And one of the 5 points that we wanted to talk about a little bit further, this was an article by Tim Terrell Smith, and it was posted earlier this year on the internet. The fourth way to help create your own job was to start a group of your own to attract other entrepreneurs. What do you think about that, Bill?
I think it's a great idea, and that group can be anything, but if you have 4 to 5 people who are sitting around, you've got a cup of coffee, you know, you're in kind of a friendly, relaxed atmosphere, and the question is, hey guys or gals, let's think about this. Who really needs us? What are our skills? What's our community like? Does our community have jobs? If it doesn't, and there are communities, you know, so-called bedroom communities that don't have jobs, then there are some issues, and you need to think about it. But let's think about a bedroom community. When we have people who come from out of town, et cetera, we need our lawns done, and I hear a lot of people say, "You expect me to go cut grass?" I have 2 homes in the area, and I pay the equivalent of $40 to $50 per hour to cut the grass. So
expensive, wow.
I don't know that many people, once they sit down and think about the economics of it, if you were to just go out in your neighborhood, now some people may see it as a matter of pride, but if you were to go out in your neighborhood, if there are people making the equivalent of $40 to $50 per hour cutting your grass, why aren't you out doing it? And if you spend 4 to 5 hours per day in your community, for many people, they could replace their income. But there are many other things that need to be
Earlier
done.
today, I was reading an article off the internet too, where a guy who works full-time Monday through Friday does on the weekends exactly what he did as a teenager to make extra cash, and that is putting a new coating on top of driveways. He says he makes about $50 an hour, and he picks up some extra cash in the weekend doing exactly the thing he's been doing for 8 years. He knows how to do it, so therefore he sat down at one point and said, what skills do I have? I know how to pave driveways. Are people willing to pay for that? Yes. here we go. So in essence, without necessarily having to go through an entrepreneurial group, he created his own job. So when you put the brain power together of you and your fellow entrepreneurs, I can't but help, I think.
Sure. And when we use that word entrepreneur, many people think about creating some unique product or service that the entire world wants and you're going to get filthy rich.
Everybody thinks they're Steve Jobs.
God rest his soul.
God rest his soul. But I think a lot of people would also say, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, name a few others, Warren Buffett, all these people were probably considered entrepreneurs, and they may look and say, there's no way I can come up with stuff like they do. I'm not that smart.
But entrepreneur really means someone who's creative, someone who takes advantage of this situation, advantage in the positive sense. So let's, again, we're focused on how to create your own job, because that's very important in a future where the unemployment rate may well remain at where it's at for years to come. My personal view, and I would be glad to discuss this with people offline if they want to write to me, my personal view is that the economy will stay where it is through at least 2017, 2018, but I believe the potential exists for our economy to be right where it is, and in some ways be less than where it is, all the way through 2024.
As of the date of this recording, I think everybody listening to the news also feels the same thing. They're worried about the economy. Those that have jobs are worried about keeping them, and those that don't have jobs are even more worried about finding a new one to go to.
True. But one of the things that I really see in a lot of people, though, is they're still thinking the old way about their next job. They wake up and they say, I need to find something, and they're looking to find a job with a company that's going to pay them for a 40-hour week, that gives them benefits, etc. Bottom line is, those jobs are out there. They will be out there to some degree, but the world has changed, and I believe that salaries will continue to go down. There is no reason, and people will shoot me for this, there is no reason that people will be worth in the future what they're currently making. I believe that salaries will continue to decrease for each and every person in the U.S. in general by anywhere from 1% to 3% per year for the next 20 years.
Now, one of the things we discussed earlier before we were on camera was that people were going to actually lose wages. How much do you think the wages are going to go down over the next few years?
I really believe that over the next 10 years at least, that wages will decrease anywhere from 20 to 30%.
Now, does that mean because they're losing buying power, or do you think people are going to take pay cuts?
People will take pay cuts. It will be through pay cuts and a combination of just the ability to keep up inflation. So I mentioned a second ago that people should expect to lose 1% to 3% in their pay each year. That's just through natural inflation, because bonuses and salary increases are not out there. But over the last 2 years, 2009 and 2010, approximately 40% of Americans have taken pay cuts in each of those years. We need to keep in mind a couple of things. Americans are not price competitive anymore with the world. So when someone says, our jobs are going overseas, here's where I believe that the rug is being pulled out from many Americans. They are being sold down the river. But that said, there's nothing I can do about that, and they need to realize that our system is what it is.
Well, that was a question I was going to ask you too, and I'm going to ask you right now, is what can we do to shake people to say that you need to change the way the world is? This is not the world your mom and dad were brought up in, where you could go get a 40-hour-a-week job and really trust that you'll have that the rest of your life. That's gone. That's changed.
It is. It is gone, and it's changed for a very important reason. We need, it's a very short history lesson here. The American society and American industry and our way of life in many ways is artificial due to World War II. At the end of World War II, outside of the United States, whatever we would like to call the industrial world was destroyed, period. Much of the world was still in turmoil because you had empires, whether it's the Dutch or the French or the British empires or the collapsing of the Japanese empire or whatever. You had the world in flux, and the U.S. was able to call all the shots. We were able to buy energy at super cheap rates. We basically could walk into any country and we wrote their laws and their economic.
But somewhere somebody must have realized this was coming.
You know, many economists began writing on this in the late 70s and 80s, saying it is coming. And in fact, if we look at the policies of President Reagan in the early 80s, he argued free trade and open markets were essential because that's the way the world would go. And in many cases, whereas President Nixon opened China, it was President Reagan that opened the Chinese markets and began the process of globalization. From my perspective, there are 3 periods of globalization, and they're incredibly fast. The first period of globalization in the late 70s that went into Reagan's period was we had international companies. We began, as Europe recovered and other places industrialized, the Japanese, we had international companies, but we were still American products, Japanese products. Our markets were protected. President Reagan opened that up. And the result is that we have incredibly cheap products today.
One could even say that maybe even Nixon opened that up by going to China.
Sure, and if you, from what Nixon began to what President Reagan did is a natural extension. But then we get to the 1990s to where the idea of really a German company or an American company or a Chinese company no longer really means anything.
Sure, you know, they became international companies.
Well, they became international. But we have a major challenge today, and that is what I call globalization version 3. When information can move, or what we're doing right here, the idea that even 10 years ago someone could throw together a studio, now it's taken several months to get to where we are, but the idea that someone could throw together a studio really on a budget, but it doesn't have to cost, it was unthinkable. The fact that we can even think about distributing videos around the world, making them available 24/7, and et cetera, the computing power we have, the ability to use information, but if your job is information-based, it's going to cost you your job, or your job is in jeopardy. And many jobs that involves many jobs, even auto mechanics. So you need to focus on the future, and your focus needs to be creating your own job, developing an assessment of your real value, not how much you want to make. Good to know, but that's not necessarily important. How much you want to make, and who cares?
And that brings us to the end of another edition of USAJobZoo.com TV, sponsored by IntelligenceCareers.com, and our featured employer is Lockheed Martin. If you go to IntelligenceCareers.com or USAJobZoo.com, you'll find information about Lockheed Martin and who and what they're hiring for.
Just click the big Lockheed Martin banner at the top of each and every webpage, and you'll get in contact. So for now, until we meet again next week, this is Bill Golden.
And I'm AJ Janitschek. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.
Bye.